Hey, Team Healthy. I'm so glad to be with you. Most of you who are regulars anyway, you know that this is a highlight of my week. I do the videos and I do those at all different times of the day. So, it's just kind of not terribly regular in my schedule as to when I'm going to do that. But this time, every single week, midweek with Dr. C is it's fixed, it's set, it's in my schedule. I look forward to it. I collect questions from you all during the week, and it allows me to get to know who you are so that I can respond in more particular kind of ways. And I like it. And I'm just glad you all are here with me. It's just a different kind of format. For those of you who are new, if you'll leave questions at the bottom underneath in the comments section, I pick up on them, I read through them, and I'll try to respond to as many as I can. I like to pick up on a theme each week. And this week, we're going to be talking about how dealing with narcissists in the middle of conflict can just be so difficult. You pick up on a person's true colors when you see how they respond in conflict. It's super easy for me to be nice to you or friendly or helpful and coordinated when you're doing everything I want you to do. When we have conflict or strain or difficulty, that's when you see where a real person's heart lays. Because it's one thing to be understanding when everything's great, but it's another thing to say, I'd still like to stay in a healthy mode, even though we're not on the same page. And that's something that narcissists tend not to do. So we're going to get into questions like that. Now, before we get going, I've got a little admin kind of thing. You may have seen some of the promos that we're doing on our next webinar that's coming up on October 10th. That's 2 weeks from yesterday. I'm going to be presenting it live. It's called an Impasse Superpower: How to Set Boundaries with with a Narcissist. We may wind up setting records on this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I put a lot of information into the PowerPoint. So you're going to receive a large amount of information where I'm going to be talking about, the healthy form of empathy and what an empath is, and dark empathy, and where narcissists are coming from. We're going to talk about the particulars of boundaries, etc. This probably has more in this webinar than the others have had. So yeah, it's going to be chock full of information. So if you can watch it live, it's going to be coming October 10th. That's a Tuesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time, U.S. I know we have people literally from all around the world. And so you may not be able to do it that time. If you can't watch us with us live, then go ahead and register, and we'll just send it to you, and then you can watch it in your own time frame. You'll have everything, and it's yours to keep forever. So, and you can use it repeatedly in your own personal life. If you want to share it with other individuals, I'm fine with that. Just spell my name correctly when you say this is what Dr. C sent. That's all I ask. So anyway, just know that that's coming up. Okay. Um, let's go in with our discussion here today about how conflict with narcissists can be so difficult. And I'm going to start with the first question that I did a video not that long ago about the know-it-all narcissist, and this may have prompted the question here. But this person asked the question: how do you reconcile that you're not a know-it-all, especially when it's a highly opinionated family member saying this? I worry so much about being that way. One of the things that can happen when you're dealing with a narcissist and you're trying to figure out how you're going to manage projects, or just discuss opinions or how things should be done, or what your interpretation is of a particular event, narcissists can come on really strongly in that strong know-it-all attitude. And they use what I refer to as shutdown communication. Well, here's the way it has to be, and here's the way you need to interpret it. It's like, end of discussion. Okay, there you have it. And that's the way they tend to operate. And so this person is like, I so don't want to be that way. How do I know that? And there's actually two parts to this question. First, it says, how do you know you're not being a know-it-all? And then the second, that's part A. And then part B is especially when it's the highly opinionated family member who's accusing you of that. Okay, that's part B. We're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, how do you know that you're not being a know-it-all when you have different conflicts or issues inside in this case, a family system? You've heard me use before the term imperative thinking or imperative communication. And frankly, it's the language of control. When we say something's imperative, it's very command oriented, black and white. Do this, don't do that. And there are certain words that imperative people use, words like have to, must, can't, should, supposed to, ought to, got to, need to, had better. Are you that kind of person? Do you use a lot of imperatives? Here's the way things are supposed to be. And then right along with it, then you can become bossy toward other individuals. You can be opinionated to an unbending extent. You can be easily critical. That's what the know-it-all is going to go with. And so the question is, does that describe you? Or are you someone that says, well, sure, I have my opinions and I have my preferences, but I'm also willing to hear what you have to say. And you can have firmness. It's good to have firmness. You can have a definitive mindset, but there's a sense that says, but I know that not everybody's going to think as me, and I'm going to make room for that. And hopefully you can have a fair mindedness and objectivity. So when you ask, am I being a know it all? Then that would be some of the criteria that I would encourage you to go with, and to say nothing about defensiveness versus openness, etc. But then the second part of this question, where this person says, especially when the highly opinionated family member is the one that's saying this to this person, it's like, okay, wait just a minute here. I think we have some projection going on. So many times, and not every time, but so many times when a narcissist begins to say, there's something over here with you that I'm not pleased with. It could be normal. It could be reasonable for them to say that. Okay. But the rest of it is, so many times it's because I want to be that way. You're trying to take over in this know it all fashion. That's something that, well, I actually haven't come to terms with yet, but they're going to see in you what they haven't come to resolve within themselves. Classic projection. And so many times, in fact, I'm slated to put up a video probably in 2 or 3 weeks on projections that narcissists will put upon you. And this is one of them. They'll see all sorts of things in you that they don't come to terms with themselves. They're gaslighting you. They want to keep you in confusion. So, whenever a narcissist offers an accusation, you might want to double check. Okay, what do I know about myself? But then the rest of it is, and what's going on with that person, and know your audience and know who's giving you the input. If it's someone who has a deep reputation of being fair-minded and straightforward and trustworthy, and if they say that to you, then that might be something you want to listen to. If it's someone who's constantly blame shifting, etc., then consider the source. Okay, so hopefully that'll help you figure that one out. Now, another question, and we go back to our overall theme about having difficulty with the narcissist in the midst of conflict. This person puts it very succinctly, and I've had variations of this question many times over, and I suspect many of you have picked up on this one. This person says, can someone living with a narcissist turn into a narcissist? And the answer is, well, certainly the characteristics of narcissism can be contagious. In fact, that's another video I did years ago, 2, 3 years ago anyway. Is narcissism contagious? Let's keep in mind that narcissism is a pattern on a spectrum. None of us is so perfect. None of us is so ideal that when we examine the ingredients of narcissism, we would say, none of that ever applies to me. Okay. Narcissism is all about selfishness and entitlement and control, manipulation, wanting to be superior, being competitive, judgmental, defensive, all of those kinds of characteristics. The false self, trying to portray yourself a little bit better than what you really are. Do you ever think that way or act that way? And the answer is, yeah, you're capable of it. I'm capable of it. So let's be honest about that. And so when you ask, can this turn you into a narcissist? I'm going to hesitate on turn you into the narcissist part, but let's say that on the inside of you is at least an element that can be triggered. And we need to be honest about that. Now, you've heard me talk about the spectrum where the person way on the high end, let's say it's on a scale of 1 to 100, and they're at a 90% level and above, they're just completely impossible. But some people are at the 60% level. It's very prominent, very strong, and more than likely than not that they're going to go in that direction. Some people, and hopefully that's where we on Team Healthy would be, are down at the low end of that spectrum. 25% of the time. It can pop out 20%. Not too many people are so ideal and perfect they're going to go under 15 and 10%, but you can have a low percentage. And in the healthy mind, we want to keep it at that level. We're honest. And when it shows up, when the ingredients of narcissism are there, it's like, oh, there it is. I claim it. I acknowledge it. I know that's in me, and I'm going to do something about it. You take responsibility. So when we talk about having a non-narcissistic way of life, we're not talking about eliminating everything. In human nature, we have what we refer to as the duality. We have the propensity toward good, we have the propensity toward not good, and it resides on the inside of all of us. But those who grow the most are the ones who are honest, and they make bona fide efforts to keep it as minimal as possible and to accentuate the positives. So, can a narcissist, or being in the presence of a narcissist, make you a narcissist? Sometimes it can happen if you wind up just being so heavily of a reactor, and you're in such a counter control mindset that you wind up matching pitch with whatever unhealthy characteristics they bring to you. You want to be aware of that. Now, my presumption, though, is if you naturally can have an openness and empathy, a humility about yourself, and then that narcissist shows up and they can come at you with all sorts of accusations and rages, even, or passive aggressiveness or unfair interpretations. Be aware of what your propensities are, rather than just being a raw reactor. Yeah, you want to back away from the necessity of having to convince that person, no, I'm not the problem, you're the problem. Because when you get into that kind of tit for tat kind of exchange, they're going to get you. They're good at their game, and they're going to beat you at that game. And so the key thing is to stay out of the competition, and make sure that you are an initiator of your own healthiness, thinking in advance. Okay, there are certain things that they can say and do that will trigger me. I know that. I'm aware of it. I'm honest enough about it. I need to rehearse in advance how I'm going to be whenever they do that triggering, so that I don't match pitch with the unhealthy ingredients that they bring. That is such an essential ingredient for you, and the skill for you. It's both thinking and doing, as you engage with these people once you identify the toxicity that they bring toward you. I can't emphasize that enough. Rehearse in advance what your vulnerabilities are. Remind yourself who you're going to be and how you want to define yourself, knowing that in conflict, they're going to use every trick in the book to come after you. And self awareness and self honesty is going to be so essential. All right, this next one, and this is a little bit more specific and particular. This person writes, and my heart goes out to this individual. This person says, I've been estranged from my son since 2020, so 3 years. We did attend his wedding 2 years ago, only to be shunned. And that's got to be a difficult one. I don't know if this is a father or a mother, but okay, to be shunned at your own son's wedding, and just go off to the side. We don't need you in the pictures and all. It's humiliating, and that's what a narcissist will do. So this person goes on to say, about a month ago, my son called me to tell me that his wife is pregnant and due in a few months. I'm sure they're going to have a baby shower, and I will probably be invited to, so that person can look good. Okay, and your intuition, you kind of trust what your intuition tells you. Then this person asks the question, do I go knowing that I'm going to be shunned again? I'm going to lose no matter what I do. I keep hoping that one day he'll actually love me and realize that I'm not the ugly things that he's been projecting onto me. Um, okay, here we have a couple of really major life events: a wedding, and then the pending birth of this individual's grandchild. And you'd like for it to be a wonderful event, but in these kind of cases, and I know there are a lot of them out there, you're not alone, by the way, unfortunately. Then the question is, what do I do? If that person says I'm in a lose-lose position. If I go and then I'm shunned, that's humiliating. If I don't go, then that allows them to blame. But frankly, my question, or my response to the second half of that question, if I don't go, they're going to blame me. At some point, you just have to consider the source. And it's like, I'm not going to live according to what I think their interpretations might be. Because if that's the case, then as you're already implying, the reasoning is not very strong, and I'm not dealing with an objective situation. So I can't let that become my criteria. And so that's kind of a key as we move forward with this. My approach is, since that son has asked you to, or you may, that son may ask you to come to a shower, I would let it be known, I'm honored that you would do that. I'm pleased that you would want to include me. Before I say yes or no, I'd like to sit down and talk with you. And we the last time that we've talked about anything was at at your wedding, and I just feel uncomfortable showing up without having resolved some of the things that are there. These are large issues. Could we go somewhere and meet, or have a meal, or have coffee, or just you can come over to my place, or I'll come over to your place. Let's talk. And if that person says, I don't want to talk, the past is past, and we're not going to get into it, that's a bad sign. And your hunch is probably accurate. It's probably not going to be a good thing. And or it may be that the son will surprise you and say, I've been wanting to do that. I would welcome that. And if that's the case, you go forward with it. And that would imply that that person really is more invested than perhaps they have been in the past, with some form of reconciliation. So, in doing so, by asking that son, can you and I talk? You're putting the onus back on his shoulders. In other words, you're basically saying, would you be willing to be responsible in your relationship with me? I'm willing on my end, and you don't have to say this out loud, but that's the implication. And then go with what that person says and how they respond. If they don't, then it's like, I'm going to have to think about it very carefully, and you can weigh the circumstances. Frankly, there are other contingencies, people that you might not have seen that you want to see, and things like that. But I would definitely give the invitation that says, before we go into this, I think we have some issues that we need to at least be in the discussion phase about. Would you be willing to go there? And if the answer is a hard no, then there's a good chance that I'm going to pull back. I can't say specifically because I don't know the circumstance, but I would be very wary unless he would be willing to go into the obvious. And if he's ignoring the obvious, then that implies he's wanting you to just shut up, know what your role is, do it, and then be the prop that he wants you to be. And I know in my case, it's like, I don't know that I would want to do that. Okay. See, that's why this is so difficult, because they can't just be straight up with you, and you feel like you're playing games. Okay, another question, and this is one where, again, we have a situation where somebody's trying to deal with a family member who's incredibly petty. Let me just read it to you. This person asked, I have a narcissistic mother who I haven't spoken to in 5 years. One of the last times I spoke with her, I was looking at an old picture of her and talked genuinely about how pretty she was in that picture. At the time, she said nothing. Days later, she responded with sarcasm and blame toward me. She pretended to be shocked that I had said it, since, according to her, I've been trying to push her out of her life for years. She took a genuine compliment, twisted it around, and turned it back against me. Why are narcissists unable to receive genuine compliments and love? Now, this kind of reminds you of why you've been estranged from this individual. Let's remember, when a person is engaging with you, they're bringing all of their own history with them toward you. And with narcissists, they have so much unfinished business that they bring a lot of the turmoil and the chaos that goes with that unfinished business. And in this case, here you're talking to her. You spoke at one time with her about how pretty she was, and she seems to be rejecting that, or mocking that, or stepping on it. I'm going to make a strong assumption that deep down on the inside of herself is a lot of hidden insecurity. Am I pretty? Am I attractive? Am I appealing? Do people like me? Do people think that I'm someone that's approachable or desirable? And then for you to come along and say, I think so. apparently there's enough of a worry or concern or uncertainty inside her that rather than her thinking, well, thank you. That's really nice for you to say that. That's all she had to say. And let's say she's gained weight or her hair doesn't look the way she wants or something like that. She can say, yeah, I've got some room for improvement, but old pictures like that do show that, old grandma here still has something going. I mean, you can say something like that. But instead, what she does is she turns it around and says that she's shocked and that you have been trying to push her out. And it's like, what? Where does that come from? And this illustrates that when you're dealing with narcissists, and there's even this conflict that doesn't even have to be a conflict, what they do is they reveal their own hidden insecurities and they try to make it all about you. It would be much more honest for mom to say, when you complimented her on that picture, at one point in my life, I felt like I looked much more appealing than in the way that I would like. Right now, I'm not at that same place, or I just kind of wonder. I feel like I'm getting old and all of that. And just be honest. Narcissists don't like to be honest, keeping in mind that part of narcissism is they can't stand being vulnerable. And so, I've spoken with I'm 69 years old and I have 69-year-old friends, and I've spoken with friends, and we might say something like, "Yeah, I look at some of those old pictures, and man, I was a lot skinnier back then," or and my hair looked better, or I was actually able to get around a lot more easily. And so you can talk about it and be honest about it, but you don't have to have shame. I'm guessing that your mother is sitting on much shame and embarrassment for who she is. But instead of saying that and then allowing herself to form an alliance with you, an alliance of encouragement, all she does is blames, and she's playing out her hurt, but turning you into the problem and herself into the victim. Somehow that makes her feel good, and until she's able to come to terms honestly with herself about her internal demons, you're not going to get too far. And it makes me wonder, you know, why is it that you can't? You've had to have 5 years where you have no contact with her, and this kind of helps explain why. Okay. Actually, taking a little bit further, it sounds like mom's got some paranoia going on. Everybody probably looking at me anyway. Okay, here we go. Another question. This person asks, once a person triggers the narcissist, then they are against the narcissist. This person begins with a statement. Once you've triggered a narcissist, then the narcissist is going to interpret you as being against them. Is there any chance that they can get back to where the narcissist thinks that they're back on your side? Or is this forever? So apparently, this person is saying, I said something or I did something, and it may have been inadvertent. And as a result, then the narcissist came back at you and was angry and harsh. And it's like, I just spoke something innocently. I didn't mean to trigger you, but there it is. And they're feeling that way. And then the question is, well, am I ever going to be able to get back on their good side? And I used the word paranoia just a minute ago. There is a strong element of paranoia in so many of the narcissists. When you say something like, well, that didn't go very well, then, and it may be that something just didn't go very well, they can be thinking, you're down on my case, aren't you? You may have actually sabotaged the whole thing, didn't you? Or you're certainly taking a great deal of pleasure. And rather than thinking, no, no, it didn't, and being objective, then what they do is they make it all about themselves, and they reveal two things. One, they reveal, I have great difficulty trusting people. And then second, I have so much uncertainty about who I am and how I present myself that if somebody says something that even hints at a negative, then it triggers me down at my place of insecurity, and that's what's going on. But instead of that, they just lash out with anger or accusations. You know that I have a deep history of having taught anger workshops, and one of the things that I would teach people is that anger tends to be secondary to many other elements that are feeding into it. their insecurity, their fears, their inadequacies, those kind of things, their feeling of emptiness or disconnect. There's so many things that are feeding into it. And so when you see their anger in the midst of a difference, then all of that other stuff comes to the surface, but they don't have the self-awareness. They don't have the reflective or analytical thinking to say, I've got some serious work I need to do. It's much easier and frankly more psychologically lazy to say you're the problem, and then they move on and they continue to carry the chaos with them. It's very necessary for you to know what that is, because they want to take themselves off the hook and make you to be the problem. And your task is to see it for what it is and not bite. Don't defend, don't argue back. Hold on to your sense of well-being, because that person is not very objective. Consider the source. Okay. All right. Any of you ever been around a narcissist that just simply can't pay a compliment? This is what this next one's about. This person says, Dr. C, I've noticed a pattern among an extended family member that's helping me to not take them so personally. Okay, good for you. You're learning. This person says, when people are happy or accomplishing things, instead of that narcissist saying, hey, that's well deserved, or we're so proud of you, she always responds with, well, you're just lucky, and then proceeds to say something negative. What's behind that? So let's say you got an award, or that you had a financial windfall, or something happened, and you're telling a funny story about you and a friend, and you had a great time, or whatever it might be, as opposed to saying tell me more, or that was neat, or I'm glad that was a plus for you, which would be a form of empathy. They want to get in there and experience it with you vicariously and be an affirming presence. Part of narcissism is the inability to empathize, but instead what they do is they turn it into a competition. That should have been me. Why is it that you're having something good? Well, you just got lucky. You think that's it's because you're a great person. That's not the case. And as a result, they're thinking if something good happens to you, then somehow that diminishes me. And you're thinking, that's not in my head. I don't think that way. But because they have this false self, they have this need to be falsely superior over someone. And why don't we just start with the idea that says you're you and I'm me? We don't have to turn it into a one up, one down competition. Novel idea, but they can't grasp that. So when something good happens to someone else, it's like that should have been me. And it's their insecurity, it's their need for false superiority, and their strategy that they use in dealing with other individuals is to say, I elevate myself by diminishing you. And so that's what is revealed. And it's in these moments of tension or differentness or conflict that you see what's really pushing them. And it's pitiable when you think, okay, something as simple as saying, hey, way to go, or I'm proud of you, or I know that must have been a real plus in your day. You've had a really good week, or something like that. Rather than thinking that, it's like, but that takes attention away from me. And that makes them think that I'm no good. I wonder why they would do that. And that's what you're dealing with. And so, that being the case, know that this is someone that you're not going to be able to have a very strong adult to adult relationship with. I mean, you can't even talk about bare minimums with them, much less any kind of thing of an in-depth nature. Stay functional with people like that, and then remind yourself, I'll have my adult conversations with somebody who's advanced beyond an 8-year-old. I mean, and I mean this seriously, beyond an 8-year-old's way of reasoning. And it's not flattering, but there it is. And it's like, wow, now this person could be, 59 years old and still thinking like a grade school kid. You took my marbles. I don't like that. That kind of thing. Do kids ever play with marbles these days? I don't think so. Anyway, I had some marbles when I was a kid, but that's another story. Okay, so you old timers, you appreciate that. Okay, another person writes in. This person says, and this is one that I've got some personal stuff I want to share with. This person asked, how can a narcissist write books and articles? Not the narcissist person part, but write books and articles that are supposed to help people live better lives and still refuse to apply any of their principles into her own life. Does this make that narcissist an individual who seeks the ultimate level of control, or is it just someone looking for more accolades to feed her source of supply? So you have a situation here where somebody has decided, well, I'm going to uh, write books, I'm going to write articles, I'm going to be a life coach, I'm going to teach people how to do things. But part of it is their compensation for their own hurt and pain. Now, I'm going to go off, and I'm not going to say this is a blanket statement about everyone who doesn't have a degree in counseling. There are people out there who may take a 2 week course in life coaching and they proclaim themselves to be experts on whatever the topic might be. And one of the things that I know is a part of my own deep history is that when you're trying to break down relational and emotional and communicational issues, there can be so many factors feeding into it that a 2 week course isn't going to make you an expert. But sometimes people like to do that. And so they start writing articles, they pick up on stuff. There's one particular person out there, on YouTube, and I just kind of shrug my shoulders, but I may do a video on a particular topic, and then I notice in my feed that person does a video. I mean, I'm not being paranoid, but almost on the exact same topic, almost sometimes with the exact same title, and it's like, are you reading my mail? And I think there's some of that going on out there. Anyway, I hope I'm not being paranoid. Um, One of the things that if you're going to be somebody who purports to be an expert in relational or emotional matters is you can't just get out there and intellectualize. I had and this is where I was going to get personal. I had a professor way back in graduate school that said, Les, you're not going to be able to help or guide someone any further than where you yourself are able to go in your own personal life. And he meant it as a challenge. And it's like, I was maybe 24 years old at the time. It's like, it makes a lot of sense. So if I'm, for example, if I'm talking with people about managing their anger cleanly, it doesn't mean that I'm never going to have my angry moments, but it does mean that if I'm talking with people about it, I darn sure better be willing to say, and I'm a fellow sojourner. I'm not a person who's got it perfected. I'm not a person who knows so much that I'll never have to learn anything again. I'm walking alongside with you. I have my arm around your shoulder. I'm learning, and I want you to benefit from some of the things that I learned. And so, if you take that kind of approach and you know that you're a work in progress and that you are always going to be a lifelong learner and you want to share in a way that's not condescending, but hopefully helpful toward other individuals, then that's a good thing. But sometimes people, it's like, listen to me. I'll tell you, to the extent that they want to cover up the fact that they're struggling, or they may talk about some of their struggles. I used to be married to someone who was awful. I had family members who were awful. I had work situations that were awful. And they may seemingly come across as vulnerable when in fact it's little more than a complaint session. And it's like, well, I've got all that complaint out. Now, let me tell you what you're supposed to do. So just be very careful. What does it say? Are they trying to control you by giving you the impression they have it all together? I would say be wary of somebody who talks about personal issues only in a blaming way toward other individuals, and then also people who still may have their own constant, chronic, ongoing conflicts with others, and they contribute to it in a very overt kind of way. Just be careful, because sometimes people are trying to remedy their difficulties by declaring themselves to be cured and beyond everything. That's something we have to be very careful of, especially in the field of psychology. So, and I say that, and then I also have to look at my own self in the mirror to make sure that I'm not being some sort of phony baloney myself. Okay. Okay. Another question. I suspect some of you have heard the statement that this person is going to make. This person says, Dr. C, why during a heated discussion would the other person say, I think we should stop now before something gets said that can't be taken back? I said, why? Are you going to say something like that? And then they said, no, but you might. And then this person goes on to say, I wouldn't and I wasn't going to, but afterward I thought I wish that they would, because I'm not bothered, but why would they say that? Okay, so you have a situation where you're trying to talk about a conflict or a strain or a difficulty, and instead of feeling like you're getting somewhere, you can just feel that tension rise. And I'm going to make the assumption, I hope, that this person is saying, I'm willing to put it out there and talk objectively, but that other person is saying, well, we better stop before someone says something that isn't going to be very pretty. But then it's kind of like, yeah, you're probably that someone. And that is classic projection. It's like, yeah, I've got this stuff gurgling up inside of me. You are probably going to have some stuff gurgling up inside of you. We better stop so that we can save you from your sorry self. And they don't want to have to address the fact that sometimes I struggle. Sometimes I hit my wall and I'm really close to that wall. Can we take a break? And there are times when it's reasonable, if you've had a conflict or if you're in a conflict, to say, I know that we each have our perspectives. Right now, I think that instead of letting things get really large, I'd like to take a break. And it could be, let's take a break for 30 minutes, or let's get back with it tomorrow, with the idea that we're actually going to do that. Because sometimes then people just go passive aggressive. But when someone says something like what she's saying, basically what I'm hearing is, I'm about to blow. I have anger issues, but instead of me saying that, I'm just going to say, I think you're about to blow, and I think you have anger issues. Let's just say admitting problems and taking responsibility is not the strong suit of a narcissist. So when you have something like this that's being spoken to you, there's a real high probability that you have some projection going on. Okay. Now, another one, and I know from other comments that many of you have this situation. This person writes in about an elderly parent. This person says, my dad is in his late 80s and has been speaking a lot about where he went wrong in his life. So, okay, I don't know if I handled that correctly. And then this person says, just when I think that some light bulbs are turning on, he reverts to his mean and spiteful ways, and it gets really ugly. Is it too late to expect that he might mellow? There comes a time in a person's life, and I know I'm kind of in that mode in my stage of life, where you begin asking, what kind of legacy am I leaving? How do I want to be remembered? What, when people think of who I am and how I've managed my life, what's going to come to the forefront? And there are times when you can adjust what that legacy might be. It might be that you had a history way back when where you're a bit petulant, and now it's like, I'm going to step away from that. I'd like to be more patient. And so you have this guy in his late 80s, and he's kind of thinking that way. What kind of legacy? How are people going to remember me? And it's like, well, good for you, Grandpa. I'm glad that you're thinking that way. And so you begin taking a little bit of delight, thinking, well, don't we all have things in our deep past where we look back and say, yeah, I could have done that better? And so you want to give him some kudos. And then just about when you're feeling calm and pleasant, then this person says he reverts to his mean and spiteful ways, and it gets ugly. It's like, okay, I can't afford to drink that Kool-Aid. And so what you have to do is just take his words on a temporal basis. He's in a mindset, at least in that moment, where it's like, I do have some regrets. And he's kind of letting you see a little bit behind the veil. But then the rest of the story is, but ultimately, I still don't want to do anything about it. And that being the case, it's like, okay, I guess you're just so deeply entrenched that you can't or you won't. And I hope that a question like this, I hope that it serves to be a reminder to me and to you as we age, that we can think, even if I look back and see some things that I wish that I would have done more wisely or could have done with a greater sensitivity, I can't change the past, but I can certainly learn. And I can certainly adjust, because I like there's a developmental psychologist named Eric Erickson. Some of you may have studied him in school, in graduate school. Eric Erickson took what Freud and some of the others did with respect to developmental psychology, and they talk about all the developmental issues in your childhood, and he took it all the way to death. And he said, well, actually, in your adult life, you have stages of development, and it continues on. And I think it's so accurate. we can still develop and we can still learn and adjust and make amends. And healthy individuals will do that. I've spoken with multiple people who are getting older and wanting to make the best of the time that they have left. And it's wonderful when you see that happening and you see some transformations going on. And then others, is like they'll talk a good game, but that selfishness, that need for control, that self-absorption is so deeply entrenched that it's like when conflict comes, and that's when you're going to see the mark of a person's true nature. Then here comes the old stuff, and it's like, well, you're intellectualizing, but you haven't committed to it on a personal basis. Okay. Um, okay. Well, let's do one last question here. This person asked, "How is it that I just can't give up on a partner who seems not to like me?" And that's got to be real debilitating. This person says his anger and criticism, along with his rejection and abandonment. Okay, anger, criticism, rejection, abandonment, that kind of can be summarized. He doesn't seem to like me. Seems like distress. And his judgment is so far off. So this person is picking up on that. And then she goes on to say, the two of us have taken spiritual wedding vows a couple of years ago, and we each refuse to let go. What's going on here? Well, let's pick up on some things that we're seeing in this depiction. First, this individual is saying more or less, even without words. And by the way, tomorrow's video is about some of the hidden messages, the unspoken messages that go along with narcissism. Sometimes you don't say it, but you can pick up on those messages. But this person is actually saying, I know myself well enough to know that I have good things to offer. Okay. And so I want to grow with this person. This person's also implying my spiritual commitments are important to me. I take that seriously. And so I want to make sure that we keep going into that space with one another. But then the next assumption that person is making is surely my partner wants to join me in that. And that's the fatal clause there. There are times when you can be so committed to healthiness and growth, and it just makes sense and it feels so refreshing to think I don't have to be bound by my history of mistakes. I can always be in a growth mode. I can add new and positive ingredients to my personality. And then you look to that person off to the side and say, please join me. And their response is, join yourself. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And then all this surly, judgment and what you say, anger, criticism, rejection, abandonment. Sometimes narcissists, they don't just have anger issues. It's like they're committed to their anger issues. And so when we talk about resolving conflicts with these individuals, it's difficult when you have somebody that more or less through their behavior implies covertly, I don't grow. All I do is I hold grudges and I hold people in contempt and I stay stuck on that. John Gottman, the researcher, implies that when you hold on to contempt, that's the number one indicator of a relationship that's going to fall apart. And some folks, it's like, tell me all you want about it. That's where I am. And it's like, but don't you see the need for growth? Yeah, I see the need for growth in you. And unfortunately, you can't take your healthy ingredients and superimpose it onto the other. One of the early questions we had here today is, can you become a narcissist when you hang out with a narcissist? Unfortunately, there's kind of a negativity bias where the negative person tends to win, and the person that brings the positive, you like to think they can bring folks up. And sometimes that can happen. But when you have somebody that's so deeply entrenched in their negativity, it's far more likely that they're going to bring you down as opposed to you bringing them up. So keep that in mind. It's kind of sad, isn't it? Okay, guys, let's wrap for today. Good slate of questions here today, and please, as you have some thoughts, put them under in the comments section, and I'll pick up on them. And know that next time we're going to add some more. Remember the workshop we have on October 10th about the empath superpower and how to set boundaries. I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope it would be something you would find to be most beneficial too. So know that we have that. Okay, I will see you same time, same station next week. And I just hope that you have a good rest of the week. Team Healthy, I so appreciate you letting me be on your journey with you. Bye.